Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to Self-Worth Saturday. If you are new here, let me give you the lay of the land. So in Self-Worth Saturday, I like to go over with you a topic related to self-worth. So I share thoughts, opinions, advice based on my personal experience working with that particular topic. And I like to give you some journal prompts, some action things to do, maybe a challenge, not maybe, I usually almost always, maybe always, give you a challenge to do throughout the week. And then we like to kind of check in with each other at the end of the week and see how we did on the challenge. I do still have death cold voice. There may be some coughing. I do have a delicious chocolate milkshake to sip on to hopefully keep my throat lubricated enough that you don't have to deal with my coughing. But y'all know that editing after is not so much my jam. I like to give it to you exactly as I record it, unless I'm doing something fancy. So we're gonna just go with it. So this week's topic is shadow work. But before we dive into that, let's talk about the challenge from last week. Now, last week's topic was all about the power of not fitting in, or the beauty of being the outcast. And so our challenge was to pick a period of time, maybe it was like an hour or a day or the whole week, and just commit to being as authentically ourselves as we possibly could. This is something that for me is a conscious part of my daily life. This is a conscious choice I make to consistently be myself as much as possible, even when that is outside of societal expectation. I think I did okay with that this week. There were definitely times when I felt like I needed to, put my professional face on or whatnot, but for the most part, I tried to just let myself be me, and that meant not being as concerned if my tarot cards were out on my desk, because they often are at work, and instead of like throwing them in my bag real quick, if I just so that they're not seen or whatever, I just left them out because I do grab for them throughout the day. And I love playing with tarot, and my boss knows I read tarot and all that kind of stuff, so it was fine. I just kind of made more of an effort to be aware of when I might have been tempted to hide who I was, and did less of that. Now, it's important to point out that I am in a position in my life where I can do that relatively safely. Like, I'm not putting myself at risk, and you may not be in that position, so that's totally cool. But if you are currently watching this premiere as it's airing and you're in the live chat, or if you're watching this afterwards, leave a comment in the chat or in the comments down below. How did you do last week with picking a piece of time to just be more yourself? How did it go? Did you learn anything? Did it feel good? I would love to hear from you. So let's talk about shadow work. So this term gets thrown around a lot in the tarot community because a lot of us have done conscious shadow work as part of our spiritual practice or our tarot practice. But I feel like it's kind of like tarot community vernacular, and we don't always pause to define it for other people. And nobody wants to be the person who's like, what's shadow work? So I thought it might be helpful to actually define it and talk about it. Also, my face looks red because I have my, there's the cough. I have my Himalayan salt lamp next to me, and I love it so much, and it makes me orange, but whatever, because it just makes me happy. It's over there all glowy and pretty. Anyways, so we hear this term floating around, and I just think it's really important to point out that for the rest of this video, and for all of my videos, please keep in mind that I am no expert. I am not an expert in Jungian psychology, nothing like that. I'm speaking about and framing this discussion about shadow and shadow work based on my personal experience doing my own shadow work, and I have done a lot of it, and sort of interacting with my shadow. So keep in mind to take it with a grain of salt. Use your own inner judgment, do your own research, do your own reading. If that's what you feel called to do, just know that this is definitely coming from my me place. So with that in mind, let's jump in. So first, let's talk about what is the shadow. So I'm going to read you an excerpt from Wikipedia because it sums up the psychological term pretty well, I think. So it says, in Jungian psychology, the shadow, id, or shadow aspect archetype may refer to 1. An unconscious aspect of the personality which the conscious ego does not identify in itself, or 2. The entirety of the unconscious, in other words, everything of which a person is not fully conscious. In short, the shadow is the unknown side, because one tends to reject or remain ignorant of the least desirable aspects of one's personality. The shadow is largely negative. There are, however, positive aspects that may also remain hidden in one's shadow, especially in people with low self-esteem, anxieties, and false beliefs. I think that definition makes a lot of sense and gives you a lot to chew on. So I will try to remember to put the link to the Wikipedia article on the shadow down below so you can read a little bit more and have those words in text and not just me reading them, because I think it's worthwhile to chew on those words specifically. Oh, look, Peggy's giving the doggy some food. Hi, Peggy, say hi.
Hi, Internet. She's being a princess and wants to eat in here, and Bruno's busy eating. So.
That's fine. So we're going to continue and just kind of go on with the video.
I'm sorry, guys, going to hover.
She's hovering. We don't mind. So in essence, the shadow in my experience is those aspects of myself that I have pushed away, ignored, bottled up, or failed to notice. In my personal experience, the shadow contains those aspects of myself and my personality that I either feel shame about or that I dislike. She's crawling on the floor. Normally we get puppies in the background. Now we get like a Peggy puppy. I'm not distracted at all. Oh, she woofed. I like it.
I do better. If I do it right, you'll blush.
Moving along. Let's talk about...
I think she's done. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
Bye. Let's talk about what shadow work is. So I personally... So let me go back actually, because I'm kind of in my like auto robot mode and I want to kind of get back to like what I mean. So for me, shadow stuff is that stuff that I try not to look at because it's really uncomfortable. That's kind of in a nutshell what I was just saying. I just wanted to put it in more layman's terms because I wrote that stuff down and I don't want us to lose the meaning or the nuts and bolts of it. But for me, it's the stuff that I tend to ignore, the stuff that I don't like about myself, the stuff that's uncomfortable, or just the stuff that doesn't feel like me most of the time. So shadow work, in my opinion, in an absolute nutshell, is basically a conscious practice of being accountable to yourself. This isn't about other people. This isn't about what other people want from you, need from you, or how they're going to interact with you. This is about you noticing, shining a light on those parts of yourself that are hidden and exposing those things. So essentially, that's what this work is. It's the conscious practice of shining light into that which you have hidden, and illuminating those things about yourself that maybe you prefer not to look at or that you tend to suppress. Now, excuse me, more milkshake, clearly. As it was mentioned in the Wikipedia synopsis that I mentioned earlier, it's worth pointing out some of this stuff might be good stuff. Let's say that you love public speaking, but you've shoved that away because you're so afraid that people will think you're a fraud. So you've tucked it away and you've hidden it in your shadow. That's something that you're not going to even look at. Maybe you're artistic. Maybe you love singing or music or something else that makes you feel exposed and uncomfortable, so you've shoved it away. Most of the time, though, when we're talking in casual conversation about shadow work, because that's a thing that happens in this community, right? When we're talking about that, often we're talking about working on the difficult stuff, the stuff about us that's not so nice, the stuff about us that we wish wasn't there or that, isn't in line with our highest self. So how do you practice shadow work? Like, okay, we've defined what the shadow is. We now have an idea that, okay, this is the stuff we don't want to look at and it's really uncomfortable. So how do you do it? Well, actually, first, let's talk totally off script here for a second. Let's talk about why. Why would you practice shadow work? Why would you do that to yourself? And the fact is that a lot of us that are really into tarot or spiritual practice, a lot of us are on a personal growth path. We want to be better people. We want to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. And part of continuing on a personal growth path is taking ownership of the parts of us that aren't great and working on those things in a really conscious and mindful way. I want to be the best wife I can be and the best friend that I can be. I want to be the best me I can be for me, but I also want to be the best me I can be in my relationships and the people that I communicate with. So for me, shadow work is something that I chose to consciously dive into when I started recognizing that the person I was being most of the time in my relationships specifically my then romantic relationship, I didn't like that. I didn't like the way I was engaging with my partner. I didn't like the way that I was treating myself or treating her. And I just kind of got hit upside the head by a spiritual clue by four. And I was like, hey, I need to work on this stuff because I don't like who I'm becoming and I want to be more authentically me. And in a way, when we deny our shadow, we're denying a huge part of who we are, and that makes us inauthentic. It just does. So let's talk about how. So now you've determined, okay, yeah, I definitely want to work on myself. I want to work on my shadow. Let's talk about how. So in my experience, it is a 3-part simple formula: observe, own, and create conscious change. So let's talk about those 3 things. First, observe. If you want to make change in your shadow stuff, if you want to be a better person, the first step is to observe your uncomfortable stuff. It's to actually pay attention when you're behaving in a way that isn't in line with who you want to be. To pay attention when you're engaging in the toxic behavior that you learned from people in your life, from past relationships, or from a toxic upbringing, or that maybe you just picked up from a bad boss, or you never know where this stuff comes from, right? Well, maybe you do know. That's kind of the point too. But the first step is really to observe, to pay attention. And that means getting mindful. And oh man, that's a whole topic all on its own. And I think we should do a mindfulness topic at some point. I'll have to add that to the poll. But the first step is just to pay attention, to observe, to notice. And it doesn't do you, this is the blunt part, it's not going to do you a lot of good to observe unless you're recording that information somewhere. And this is where it gets a little tricky. Now, you can do this work without recording, but I am a strong and hard, fast believer in journaling, especially for shadow work, because the whole point of shadow is that we have a tendency to push it away, bottle it up, hide it, ignore it, deny it. That is our default. So if you want to work on shadow, you need to make a record of what you're noticing about yourself so that you can't as easily deny it. You've got record. You can read it back and go, oh yeah, I do this thing and this is a problem. So I really recommend in the observe step that you journal your observations. Is what it is. Step 2, own it. You have to take ownership of your stuff. This is so huge. I can't even tell you. And you know, it's not about taking the blame. Sometimes you have a whole lot of stuff that you do that was learned behavior. You had bad behavior modeled for you. You grew up in an environment where you were groomed to behave a certain way. You learned toxic stuff from society or from your parents or from your siblings or from past relationships. But Peggy dropped a line on me early in our marriage that has stuck so hard, and it made so much sense to me, and it's real simple. It may not be your fault, but it is your problem. And that is the entirety of the idea of owning it. Okay, it came from a source that wasn't your fault, but now that you've got this shadow aspect you want to work on, you need to own that it is yours to work on, that it is your responsibility if you want to make progress in that area of your life. It is your responsibility to say, okay, I have this, and now I've got to deal with it if I want to make progress in this area. I hope that makes sense. But owning it is a huge step, and it's way easier said than done. You're going to want to go, no, not my fault, not my problem, don't want to deal with it, this is uncomfortable. In fact, we're going to have a whole topic at some point on dealing with discomfort, because it's tough. It's tough to sit with discomfort. We're not living in a society where we have to do a lot of that. And some of us do. So I'm not trying to make sweeping generalizations. I have a derpy dog. Look, he's burying himself in the blanket. Admittedly more entertaining than Peggy feeding the dog earlier. Look. Sorry, I'm so distracted by my dog when he's being cute, but he's being real cute. Okay. So yes, owning your shadow. I want to make sure I covered all that. I do strongly recommend in the owning it section that you also have a journaling practice. And this is also the space where, and really in both spaces, you may want to consider making sure that you have some support. That support, depending on what you know about yourself and your needs, could be in the form of a friend, a confidant, a loved one, a therapist, a counselor. Like, there's all kinds of ways to make sure you have support. But facing your shadow, I will tell you, when I first started determined conscious shadow work, and it was about a 3 or 4 year process when I first dove into it because there was a lot to tackle, and I was doing it regularly, was really, really hard. And it's hard because you're looking at stuff you already don't want to look at, and it can be really, really difficult. So don't underestimate how intense this process can be, and do what you need to do to make sure that you're safe. But definitely record what you're doing. Like, record it, journal it. If journaling for you means talking into a recording device and like speaking it, or making videos for just yourself and documenting it that way, have some sort of practice to record. Record what you observe, record what you are owning, what you are taking responsibility for changing in your life. It is worth pointing out in all of this that this is going to make your inner critic rise up like a fierce beast. So make sure that you are comfortable with the process of shoving your inner critic in the trunk when you tackle shadow work. So I will tag a card about our topic on putting your inner critic in the back seat, like not letting your inner critic drive, because your inner critic is going to glom onto this shadow stuff like you would not believe. So make sure that you are prepared for that and that you have a handle on knowing when it's your inner critic speaking, because conscious shadow work does bring all of this stuff bubbling to the surface. The third step is about creating conscious change. This is also a fairly simple formula at the end of the day. Creating conscious change means you're now, okay, you've observed it, you know what the behavior is you want to change. Let's say your behavior is being overly judgmental. That's the one thing that you're going to work on right now. And I would strongly advise to try not to do too much all at once. So let's say it's being overly judgmental. You've decided this is a shadow. You've decided this is something you don't like about yourself, something that you have avoided dealing with, and you now want to deal with it. So you've started observing it when you're doing it. You've started owning that it's your responsibility to change it if you want to change it. And now, to create conscious change, you need to replace that shadow behavior with a positive behavior. If you haven't yet watched my chakra meditation, the tarot inspired chakra meditation, I will link that in the cards. There is a section in there that is when we are traveling through the solar plexus chakra. I just touched my solar plexus chakra. I'm like, yeah, of course, solar plexus. But when you're traveling through the solar plexus chakra, you're traveling through the domain of the chariot. And the chariot is currently running on a particular path. And in that part of the meditation, you experience a moment where you make a conscious choice to get out of that rut, out of that path that you've worn over and over again with a repeated pattern, and you decide to go in a new direction in this meditation. That is the crux of conscious change. Basically, we build a habit because we do it over and over again. So if you want to change that habit, if you just try to stop, where's the chariot going to go? Where are you going to put your wheels? They're going to slip back into the same rut over and over again. If you're just like, I'm just going to not be judgmental anymore. Okay, that's hard. You need to give your mind and your psyche, I guess, something else to do instead. So conscious change means that you notice when you're doing it and you give yourself a positive habit in that moment to do instead. So in the judgmental example, if you notice yourself judging somebody, then the task would be to maybe every time you notice yourself judging somebody, you make a point of noticing something about that person that you respect, appreciate, or like. It can be the dumbest thing. It can be like, well, at least they have pretty hair. And it doesn't have to be substantial. It's just a way to retrain your mind to do something new, different, and better. Something that's more in line with where you want to go in your personal growth journey. I hope that makes sense. We're going to obviously be unpacking a lot of this stuff in the live chat that follows this video. But I just wanted to give you that real thing to chew on about how you build new, better habits. Let's talk about a couple of other considerations. As I mentioned, shadow work, so I'm just recrossing my legs. Shadow work is intense, it's difficult, and it can make things bubble up that you're maybe not prepared to deal with. Please consider that it does involve sitting with discomfort. I can't say it enough. It's not a comfortable process. Don't try to take on too much too soon. Take itty bitty baby steps. I'll link baby steps in the cards as well, because it's important to not bite off more than you can chew and to be very aware of what you are comfortable with and what feels safe for you to explore. Know your limits. I cannot stress that enough. There is a certain amount of self-awareness you need before you even begin to do shadow work, or you are going to mess with your head, and that's not necessarily going to be helpful. If looking at shadow work is likely to spiral you into depression or is likely to make you feel really, really bad about yourself, you might not be ready, and there is no shame in that. Just know your limits, be real aware, and make sure that you're considering the impact that this is going to have on your inner critic. Make sure that you have support. Again, can't stress that enough. You may think, I'm a badass, I've got this, but make sure you have somebody in your life that is 100% trustworthy, that you feel very safe with, that you can unpack this stuff with. Chances are real good that might not be who you think it's going to be. It might not be the person you necessarily feel closest with. It might be the person that you just know is going to have you in these situations and be able to help you. Sometimes that's not your partner or your friend or your sibling. Sometimes that's going to be your mental health professional, your counselor, your therapist. Make sure that you have yourself surrounded with support so that if things go funky for you, if it gets into a place that you're just not prepared to handle and you experience overwhelm, I think I just totally drooled on myself. So that's happening on camera. You're welcome. But just make sure that you have support. Don't assume it's going to be a cakewalk. Assume bad stuff's going to come up for you and you're going to need somebody to lean on. Assume that, please. Shadow work aftercare is totally a thing. So let's say you've got your support network, you know you're good, you have at least one good person that you can lean into, you've got either a professional or friend or a loved one, you know your limits, you know you're ready for this, you know you've got this. Plan for aftercare. Plan time to actually work on this. In other words, if you're doing your journaling practice for observing and for owning your shadow, set aside time for right after a session of journaling to do something that you associate with self-care and self-compassion. I will link our video on self-compassion and self-care. Have an activity that you can reach into, even if it's just like reading a fiction book for a little while to get away from all of the intensity. Maybe it's a bubble bath. Maybe it's a distracting thing like going for a walk or watching a movie or a TV show. Do something to give yourself a palate cleanser mentally and emotionally after you've done shadow work. I think planning for shadow work aftercare is really important. Finally, please just be gentle with yourself. This is a really difficult thing to dive into, and you can do it in very shallow layers and just start to peel it back a little bit at a time. You can play with shadow work tarot spreads. You can find lots of them online, and I'm about to hit you with one in our challenge. You can do card draws thinking about your shadow. You can just kind of gnaw at this in little teeny nibbles. You don't have to do it all at once. So be gentle with yourself. All right, so that wraps up our overview of shadow work. There's going to be, like I said, tons to unpack in the live chat, but first let me give you a couple of journal prompts to maybe play with if you're so called. So journal prompt number 1, what do you feel the benefits of shadow work are or could be for you personally? I need a little milkshake. And number 2, if you are interested in or currently practicing shadow work, what self-care aftercare practices or rituals do you think you could use to help balance out the heaviness of this work for you personally? Those are our 2 journal prompts. Enjoy them, play with them, do some writing, figure out if this is going to be for you. And now our challenge. Little bit of a clearing my throat. So I'm going to be shuffling our Oracle card draw, which are coming from the Work Your Light Oracle cards by Rebecca Campbell. The artwork is by Danielle Noel, artist behind the Star Child and Moonchild Tarot. I thought Work Your Light was perfect when we're talking about shadow work, just as our own little palette cleanser for right here in this discussion. But as I shuffle, here is our challenge. If you choose to accept it, try out this 3-card Introduction to Shadow Work spread that I have created for you. So, position number 1, observe. What aspect of shadow can I most easily illuminate at this time? That's your first card position. Card position 2, I just had a jumper, so I'm going to grab that one. Card position 2, own. How can I take responsibility for this shadow aspect? And card position 3, create conscious change. What practice or new habit can I develop to create conscious change in this area of self? I was just about to cough. And our oracle card is boundaries. How potent is that? Where do you need to establish better boundaries? So important when we're working on shadow work to remember that we still need to have good boundaries with the people in our lives. Sometimes there are going to be people in your life who are not appropriate to discuss your shadow work with. Some people have their own shadow stuff, and their shadow stuff might glom onto your shadow stuff, and it might not be a good mix. So really be mindful of who you're sharing this aspect of yourself with. Make sure that you're selective and having an incredibly high standard for whoever you're going to work through this stuff. You're going to work through it yourself, but whoever you're going to trust to discuss any of this stuff with, because this is the stuff that is going to make you feel the most vulnerable and the most tender and the most defensive and the most scared. So keep in mind that it's good to have real strong badass boundaries when you are doing shadow work. Finally, you guys, remember that if you are enjoying Self-Worth Saturday, click the little like button if you haven't done it yet. If you're new here, subscribe, hang out with us, join the discussions, comment down below with something that this shadow work thing is bringing up for you. Not your own shadow stuff, but just like what you feel called to work on. Not specifically, I'm not saying that right. Comment something fun. I'm just trying to ask for comments, y'all. Let's just own it, okay? But you don't have to comment. It's all fine. We're going to have a lovely, lively live chat, which you can participate in or watch back later. But I'm going to call this video done for now and have a nice big sip of my milkshake. Before I go, remember to repeat to yourself as often as possible, I am worthy and I am unafraid. All right, I'll see you guys in the live chat. Bye for now.